Marcus Thompson had been protecting the British royal family for 12 years. At 41, he was one of the most respected guards at Windsor Castle. His sharp eyes missed nothing, and his calm manner made everyone feel safe around him. Marcus came from a working-class family in Manchester. His father worked in a factory, and his mother cleaned offices at night. When Marcus joined the Royal Protection Squad, his parents were so proud they cried. The castle was always busy with visitors, staff and family members coming and going. Marcus knew every face, every routine, every sound that belonged in these ancient halls. He could spot trouble from across a crowded room. That skill had saved lives more than once during his career. On a cold November morning, Marcus was assigned to the East Wing, where the royal family's personal quarters were located. The autumn sun barely reached through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the stone floors. He walked his usual route, checking doors and watching for anything unusual. That's when he first saw Emma. She was 7 years old. With blonde hair that needed brushing and clothes that didn't quite fit right, Emma was the daughter of Sarah Mitchell, who had married Lord James Ashford 6 months earlier. Lord Ashford was a distant cousin of the royal family and often stayed at the castle during official events. Emma sat alone in a small alcove near the library, holding a worn teddy bear. Most children her age would be running around, making noise, exploring every corner they could find. But Emma was perfectly still, almost invisible in her quiet corner. She stared out the window with eyes that looked much older than 7. Marcus had seen many children visit the castle over the years. Royal children, visiting dignitaries, kids, staff members, families during special events. They were usually excited, curious, sometimes overwhelmed by the grandeur around them. But they were never this quiet, this withdrawn. Something about Emma reminded Marcus of his younger sister Katie. When they were children, Katie would hide in corners when their neighbor Mr. Henderson came around. It took months before Katie finally told their parents that Mr. Henderson had been touching her inappropriately. Marcus was only 10 at the time, but he never forgot how small and scared Katie looked during those months. As Marcus continued his rounds, he kept thinking about the little girl in the alcove. When he passed by again, an hour later, Emma was still there, still holding her teddy bear, still staring out the window. She hadn't moved at all. During his lunch break, Marcus asked Janet Williams, the head housekeeper, about the Ashford family. Janet had worked at the castle for 23 years and knew everything about everyone who lived there. Lord Ashford married Sarah Mitchell in May, Janet explained while pouring tea. Lovely woman, very quiet. She lost her first husband in a car accident 2 years ago. Lord Ashford swept her off her feet, apparently. Very romantic story. What about the daughter? Marcus asked casually. Janet's expression changed slightly. Emma's having a difficult time adjusting. Lord Ashford isn't used to children. I think he finds her rather. Trying. He's been quite strict about her behavior. Says she needs discipline and structure. What kind of discipline? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice neutral.
Oh.
You know how it is with these old-fashioned types? No noise, no running, no childish nonsense. He wants her to behave like a little adult. Sarah tries to protect her, but she's caught between wanting to please her new husband and caring for her daughter. Marcus finished his tea and went back to work. But he couldn't stop thinking about Emma. As the afternoon wore on, he found himself checking on her whenever he passed the alcove. She was always there, always quiet, always still. Around 4 o'clock, Marcus heard voices coming from down the hall. He recognized Lord Ashford's deep, commanding tone. The man was talking to someone in the family's private sitting room. Marcus couldn't make out the words, but the tone was harsh and angry. Then he heard a woman's voice, softer, pleading. That would be Sarah, Emma's mother. She sounded upset, maybe even crying. Marcus moved closer, staying professional but alert. It was his job to be aware of everything happening in the castle. The arguing stopped suddenly. A door slammed. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall as Lord Ashford stormed past Marcus without making eye contact. The man's face was red with anger. His hands clenched into fists. Marcus waited a few minutes, then walked toward the sitting room. The door was slightly open. Inside, He could see Sarah Mitchell sitting on a sofa, her face in her hands. She was crying quietly, trying to muffle the sound. This was difficult territory for Marcus. He was trained to protect the royal family and their guests, but he was also trained to be invisible, to not interfere in private family matters. Royal protection officers learned early in their careers that discretion was everything. They saw and heard many things that never left the castle walls. But something felt wrong here. Marcus's instincts, honed by years of watching for danger, were sending up warning signals. He had learned to trust those instincts completely as he stood there listening to Sarah's muffled sobs. Marcus made a decision. He would start paying much closer attention to the Ashford family, not just for security reasons, but because sometimes the greatest threats to innocent people came from inside their own homes. He walked back toward Emma's alcove. She was still there, but now she was rocking slightly back and forth, still clutching her teddy bear. As Marcus approached, she looked up at him with those tooled eyes. "Hello," Marcus said gently, crouching down to her level. "I'm Marcus. I work here at the castle." Emma stared at him for a long moment, then looked down at her bear. She didn't say anything, but Marcus noticed something that made his heart sink. There was a dark bruise on her wrist, just visible below the sleeve of her sweater. "That's a nice bear," Marcus said, keeping his voice soft and friendly. "What's his name?" "Mr. Buttons," Emma whispered, so quietly Marcus almost missed it. "Mr. Buttons looks like a very good friend," Marcus said. "Has he been taking care of you?" Emma nodded, then looked back out the window. But for just a moment, Marcus saw something in her expression that confirmed all his suspicions. It was fear, pure and simple. This little girl was afraid, and Marcus was going to find out why. Over the next 3 days, Marcus began changing his patrol routes to pass by Emma's favorite hiding spots more frequently. The little girl seemed to have claimed several quiet corners throughout the castle as her own. She moved between them like a ghost, always carrying Mr. Buttons, always looking for places where she wouldn't be noticed. Marcus started, keeping a mental log of Emma's movements and behavior. She was most relaxed in the mornings, when Lord Ashford was usually in meetings or away from the castle entirely. During these times, Emma would sometimes venture into the gardens with her mother. Sarah would try to encourage her daughter to play. But Emma seemed to have forgotten how to be a normal 7-year-old child. The afternoons were different. When Lord Ashford returned to the family quarters, Emma would disappear into her hiding spots. She became even quieter, even more careful about making any noise. Marcus noticed that she flinched whenever she heard Lord Ashford's voice, even from a distance. On Thursday afternoon, Marcus was stationed near the main staircase when he heard shouting coming from the Ashford quarters. Lord Ashford was yelling about something, his voice echoing down the hallway. Marcus couldn't make out the exact words, but the anger in the man's tone was unmistakable. Then he heard a child crying. Not the normal crying of a child who had fallen down or been told no. This was the desperate, terrified crying of someone in real pain and fear. The sound cut through Marcus like a knife, bringing back memories of his sister Katie's quiet sobs all those years ago. Marcus started walking toward the sound, his training warring with his instincts. Technically, he had no business interfering in a family's private matters. But that crying didn't sound like discipline or normal punishment. It sounded like something much worse. As he got closer, he heard Sarah's voice pleading with her husband. "James, please. She's just a little girl. She didn't mean to break it. Please stop. She needs to learn respect," Lord Ashford shouted back. "I won't have this behavior in my house. She's been coddled too long." The crying got louder, more desperate. Marcus found himself standing outside their door, his hands clenched into fists. Every instinct told him to burst through that door and stop whatever was happening inside. But his training held him back. He was a royal protection officer, not a police officer. He had no authority to interfere in domestic matters. The crying stopped suddenly. Either Emma had been removed from the room, or she had been hurt so badly that she couldn't cry anymore. Both possibilities terrified Marcus. He forced himself to walk away, but he didn't go far. He positioned himself at the end of the hallway where he could see the Ashford door, but wouldn't be obvious about watching. 20 minutes later, Lord Ashford emerged, straightening his tie and smoothing his hair as if nothing had happened. After Lord Ashford left, Marcus waited another 10 minutes before approaching the door. He knocked gently and identified himself as castle security, doing routine checks. Sarah opened the door, and Marcus's heart sank. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked exhausted. Behind her, he could see Emma sitting on a sofa, perfectly still, except for the occasional hiccup that followed hard crying. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Ashford?" Marcus asked, using the woman's married name, even though it felt wrong in his mouth. "Yes, of course," Sarah said quickly, but she couldn't meet his eyes. "Everything's fine. Emma just had a little accident with one of James's. With one of Lord Ashford's belongings. He was understandably upset." Marcus looked past Sarah to Emma. The little girl was staring straight ahead, not responding to their conversation at all. She was holding Mr. Button so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Perhaps I should speak with Lord Ashford about castle security procedures for family quarters," Marcus said carefully. "We like to make sure everyone feels safe and secure during their stay." Sarah's eyes widened with fear. "Oh no, please don't. That's not necessary. Really, everything is perfectly fine. James doesn't like. He prefers privacy. He wouldn't appreciate security personnel getting involved in family matters." The fear in Sarah's voice told Marcus everything he needed to know. This woman was as much a victim as her daughter, trapped in a situation she couldn't escape from alone. "Of course," Marcus said gently. "But please know that castle security is always available if you need anything. Anything at all. Day or night." He looked directly at Emma when he said this, hoping the little girl would understand that she had an ally in the castle. Emma's eyes met his for just a moment, and he saw a flicker of something that might have been hope. That evening, Marcus couldn't concentrate on anything else. He called his sister Katie, now a social worker in Birmingham, and told her about the situation without using names or specific details. "Trust your instincts," Katie told him. "Children don't become that withdrawn and fearful without good reason. And if the mother is making excuses and seems afraid to, then you're probably looking at a pattern of abuse." "But I can't prove anything," Marcus said. "I've seen some bruises, heard some shouting, but nothing that would stand up in court." "You don't need proof to start documenting what you see," Katie said. "Write down dates, times, behaviors you observe. Take photos if you can do it safely. Build a record. And remember, in situations like this, the abuser usually gets more bold over time, not less. If you're right about what's happening, it's going to get worse." Katie's words haunted Marcus as he tried to sleep that night. He kept thinking about Emma's too-quiet behavior, her flinching at loud sounds, the way she held her teddy bear like it was the only safe thing in her world. The next morning, Marcus started keeping detailed notes in a small notebook he carried. He wrote down everything he observed about the Ashford family's interactions. When Emma appeared with new bruises, when Sarah looked like she had been crying, when Lord Ashford seemed particularly angry or stressed, he also began talking to other castle staff members, carefully and casually asking about their observations. The picture that emerged was troubling. Several staff members had noticed that Emma was unusually quiet and fearful for a child her age. The kitchen staff mentioned that she barely ate during meals. The housekeeping staff had found her hiding in storage, closets, and empty rooms. Most telling of all was a conversation Marcus had with Robert Chen, the castle's longtime groundskeeper. Robert had been working at the castle for 15 years and had seen many families come and go. "That little girl is scared of her own shadow," Robert said, while they were both taking a break in the staff room. "Reminds me of my nephew when he was living with his stepfather. Turned out the man was beating him regularly. Same look in the eyes, same way of trying to disappear." Marcus felt sick to his stomach. Everything he was hearing confirmed his worst fears about what was happening to Emma. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in late November. Marcus was conducting his regular patrol when he heard a commotion coming from the family dining room. Voices were raised, and he could hear the sound of something breaking, followed by a sharp slap that echoed through the hallway. Then came Emma's scream. Not crying this time, but a scream of pure terror and pain that made Marcus's blood run cold. He had heard that exact sound once before, when his sister Katie had fallen down the stairs after their neighbor had pushed her during one of his attacks. Without thinking, Marcus broke into a run toward the dining room. His training told him to be cautious, to assess the situation before acting. But his instincts as a human being overpowered everything else. A child was in immediate danger, and that was all that mattered. He burst through the dining room doors to find a scene that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Emma was on the floor, curled up in a ball, trying to protect herself. Lord Ashford stood over her, his hand raised as if to strike her again. Sarah was pressed against the far wall, tears streaming down her face, looking absolutely helpless. The moment Lord Ashford saw Marcus, his demeanor changed completely. He straightened up, smoothed his jacket, and put on the charming smile that had served him well in royal circles for years. "Ah, Thompson," he said casually, as if nothing had happened, "just dealing with a bit of childish misbehavior. Nothing that concerns security, I assure you." Marcus looked at Emma, who was still on the floor, still curled up defensively. There was a red mark on her cheek where she had been slapped, and her left arm was bent at an odd angle that suggested she might have hurt it when she fell. "Sir, I need you to step away from the child," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. Lord Ashford's friendly facade cracked slightly. "I beg your pardon? This is my stepdaughter, and this is a private family matter. You have no authority here." "Actually, sir, I do," Marcus said, moving closer to Emma. "The safety of all persons within these castle walls falls under my jurisdiction, and right now, I'm concerned about this child's immediate safety." Marcus knelt down beside Emma, speaking to her in the gentle voice he used with his own young nieces and nephews. "Hello, Emma. It's Marcus. Remember me? We talked about Mr. Buttons the other day." Emma looked up at him with eyes full of terror, but also with a spark of recognition. She nodded slightly, still clutching her teddy bear. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" Marcus asked softly. "Can you tell me where it hurts?" Emma pointed to her arm and whispered, "It hurts when I move it." Marcus is trained. I could see that the arm was likely injured, possibly broken. He looked up at Lord Ashford, and all pretense of politeness disappeared from his voice. "Sir, this child needs immediate medical attention. I'm calling for the castle physician right now." "Now see here," Lord Ashford began, his voice rising with indignation. "You cannot simply waltz in here and interfere with my family. Do you know who I am? Do you understand the connections I have?" Marcus stood up slowly, his full height and training evident in every movement. At 6 feet 2 inches, and built like the former military man he was, Marcus could be quite intimidating when necessary. "Sir, I know exactly who you are," Marcus said quietly. "You're a man who just physically assaulted a 7-year-old child in front of multiple witnesses. And I'm the Royal Protection Officer who's going to make sure it never happens again." The room fell silent except for Emma's quiet whimpering. Sarah looked terrified. Caught between relief that someone was finally intervening and fear of what her husband might do to her and Emma later, Marcus pulled out his radio and called for both the castle physician and backup security. Then he called his supervisor, Chief Inspector Patricia Wells, and explained the situation in clear professional terms. "I need Child Protective Services contacted immediately," Marcus said into the radio. "We have a situation involving suspected child abuse of a minor currently residing in the castle." Lord Ashford's face turned purple with rage. "You've just destroyed your career, Thompson. I'll have you fired before the sun sets. Do you understand what you've done?" Marcus looked down at Emma, who was watching him with those 2 old eyes that had seen far too much pain for someone so young. Then he looked back at Lord Ashford. "Yes, sir. I understand exactly what I've done. I've protected a child who needed protecting, and I do it again without hesitation." Within 10 minutes, the castle physician arrived and began examining Emma. Her left arm was indeed broken, and she had multiple bruises in various stages of healing all over her body. The doctor, an experienced man named Dr. Harrison, who had seen many injuries during his 40-year career, took one look at the pattern of bruises and immediately understood what had been happening. Chief Inspector Wells arrived shortly after. Along with 2 additional security officers, she took one look at the situation and immediately took charge of the scene. "Lord Ashford, I need you to remain in this room while we sort this out, she said firmly. Mrs. Ashford, would you please accompany your daughter to the infirmary? Sarah looked at her husband fearfully, but Wells stepped between them. Psst. Ferd, Wells said gently but firmly. Your daughter needs medical attention, and she needs her mother with her. Go with her now. As Sarah helped Emma to her feet, the little girl looked back at Marcus. For the first time since he had met her, she gave him a small smile. Thank you, she whispered, so quietly that only Marcus heard her. Those 2 words made everything worth it. Marcus knew he had probably ended his career in royal protection, but he also knew he had saved a child's life. As he watched Emma walk away with her mother, supported by Dr. Harrison, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years, the absolute certainty that he had done the right thing, regardless of the consequences. Lord Ashford stood in the corner of the room. No longer the charming aristocrat who moved in royal circles. He was just what he had always been, a bully who picked on those smaller and weaker than himself. And for the first time in Emma's young life, someone had been strong enough and brave enough to stand up to him. Within 2 hours, the castle was swarming with officials. Social services arrived first, followed by local police detectives who specialized in child abuse cases. The royal family's private secretary, Jonathan Mitchell, appeared to handle the delicate public relations aspects of having such a serious incident occur within royal walls. Marcus spent the next 4 hours giving detailed statements to multiple investigators. He handed over his notebook with all the observations he had been recording, along with the names of other staff members who had witnessed concerning behavior from Lord Dead, Detective Inspector Sarah Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran of child protection cases, interviewed Marcus in the castle's private security office. She was impressed by the thoroughness of his documentation and his professional approach to a highly emotional situation. You did exactly the right thing, she told Marcus. Your notes and observations are going to be crucial evidence. Most child abuse cases fail because there's no documentation, no pattern established. You've given us a solid foundation to work with. What happens now? Marcus asked. To Emma and her mother, I mean? Emma's being examined by specialists at the hospital as we speak, Detective Rodriguez explained. The doctors will document all her injuries, both current and historical. Mrs. Mitchell is being interviewed by social workers who specialize in helping mothers who are also victims of domestic violence. She paused and looked directly at Marcus. You should know that Mrs. Mitchell has confirmed everything you suspected. Lord Ashford has been physically abusing Emma for months, and he's been threatening and controlling his wife as well. She was terrified to speak up because he told her he would make sure she never saw her daughter again if she caused trouble. Marcus felt sick thinking about what Emma and her mother had been enduring in silence. Will they be safe now? They're in protective custody, Detective Rodriguez assured him. Lord Ashford won't be able to contact or approach them, and based on the evidence we're collecting, he'll be facing serious criminal charges. While Marcus was giving his statements, other castle staff members were also being interviewed. The pattern of evidence that emerged painted a clear picture of escalating abuse that had been hidden behind Lord Ashford's respectable public image. Janet Williams, the head housekeeper, tearfully told investigators about finding Emma hiding in supply closets and storage rooms throughout the castle. The poor little thing was always looking for somewhere safe, Janet said. I thought she was just shy, but now I realize she was trying to escape. Robert Chen, the groundskeeper, described finding Emma in the gardens early one morning, sitting by herself and crying quietly. When he had asked if she was okay, she had begged him not to tell anyone where she was, because she didn't want to get in trouble again. The kitchen staff revealed that Emma barely ate during meals when Lord Ashford was present, and that they had often seen her mother making excuses for why Emma couldn't come to family dinners. Most damaging of all was testimony from Margaret Foster, a senior maid who had been cleaning near the family quarters when she heard Lord Ashford threatening Emma. She had heard him tell the little girl that if she ever told anyone about their discipline sessions, he would make sure her mother got hurt too. As the investigation unfolded, Marcus waited in the security office, wondering what would happen to his career. He had violated protocol by intervening in what was technically a private family matter, Even though he had saved a child from abuse, there would likely be professional consequences. Chief Inspector Wells came to find him around 8 o'clock that evening. Marcus had been expecting bad news, but the expression on her face was unreadable. "Thompson," she said, sitting down across from him, "I've just finished a very interesting conversation with the Home Secretary's office." Marcus's heart sank. If the Home Secretary was involved, his career was definitely over. They wanted to know about the Royal Protection Officer who had exposed a child abuser operating within royal circles. Wells continued, "Apparently they're very concerned about how this situation was allowed to develop undetected for so long." Marcus frowned. This wasn't the conversation he had expected to have. Ma'am, I broke protocol. I interfered in a private family matter without proper authorization. I understand if disciplinary action is necessary." Wells actually smiled. "Thompson, you identified a serious threat to child safety within the royal residence and took appropriate action to neutralize that threat. That's exactly what royal protection officers are supposed to do." She pulled out a folder and opened it. On the desk between them, "Investigation has revealed that Lord Ashford has been using his royal connections and his position in society to intimidate people into silence about his behavior. There are 3 other families who have come forward with similar stories after hearing about today's arrest. You've exposed a predator who is using his social status as protection." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So I'm not being dismissed?" "Dismissed?" Wells laughed. "Thompson, you're being commended. The royal family themselves have expressed their gratitude for your actions. They're horrified that this was happening under their roof, and they want to make sure everyone knows they support your decision to protect that little girl." She handed him an official letter bearing the royal seal. "This is a formal commendation for exemplary service in the protection of vulnerable persons. It will become part of your permanent record." Marcus looked at the letter, barely able to process what was happening. "What about Lord Ashford? His threats about having me fired?" "Lord Ashford is currently in custody facing multiple charges of child abuse, domestic violence, and threatening behavior," Wells said grimly. "His threats carry about as much weight as his promises to be a good stepfather, which is to say none at all." As Marcus walked back to his quarters that evening, he felt emotionally drained, but also deeply satisfied. For the first time in days, he wasn't worried about Emma's safety. She was in a hospital where trained professionals were taking care of her injuries, both physical and emotional. Her mother was getting the support she needed to break free from an abusive marriage, and Lord Ashford was exactly where he belonged, in a jail cell, unable to hurt anyone. The next morning brought even better news. Detective Rodriguez called to update Marcus on Emma's condition. The little girl had slept through the night for the first time in months, according to her mother. She was talking to the hospital's child psychologist and had even played with some toys the nurses had brought her. "She's asking about you," Detective Rodriguez told Marcus. "She wants to know if the nice security man is the reason the bad man can't hurt her anymore." Her mother told her yes, and Emma said she wants to thank you properly when she's feeling better. Marcus smiled, thinking about the brave little girl who had endured so much in silence. "Tell her that Mr. Buttons deserves the real credit for keeping her safe until the grown-ups could help."
"I will," Detective Rodriguez promised.
"And Thompson, thank you. In my 20 years of doing this job, I've seen too many cases where adults looked the other way because it was easier than getting involved. You're one of the good ones." 3 weeks later, Marcus was back on duty, but assigned 2 different quarters of the castle, while the Ashford situation was being resolved. The royal family had requested that he be given temporary, lighter duties while the investigation concluded and court proceedings began. The break-in routine gave Marcus time to process everything that had happened. He had been sleeping better, knowing that Emma was safe, but he still thought about her every day. Detective Rodriguez called regularly with updates, and the news was consistently positive. Emma was staying with her maternal grandmother in Surrey, while her mother attended counseling sessions and worked with lawyers to file for divorce from Lord Ashford. The little girl was beginning to show signs of recovery. She was talking more, playing with toys again, and had even laughed at something her grandmother said during one visit. "She's still having nightmares," Detective Rodriguez told Marcus during one of their conversations. But the child psychologist says that's completely normal. Emma is processing months of trauma, and healing takes time. The important thing is that she's safe now, and she knows she's safe. Marcus was reviewing security reports in his office when Chief Inspector Wells knocked on his door. She was carrying a large envelope and wearing the expression she reserved for delivering important news. "Thompson, I have something for you," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "The Crown Prosecution Service has asked me to thank you personally for your role in the Ashford case." She handed him the envelope. Inside was a detailed report on the investigation's findings. Marcus read through it with growing amazement at how extensive Lord Ashford's pattern of abuse had been. 6 families have now come forward with allegations against him, Wells explained. 3 other stepdaughters. 2 former housemaids who worked for him before his marriage to Sarah Mitchell, and a young woman who was his ward several years ago. Your intervention didn't just save Emma, it opened the floodgates for other victims to speak up. Marcus looked up from the report. How is that possible? How did he get away with this for so long? Money, social status, and intimidation, Wells said grimly. He was very skilled at choosing vulnerable victims and making them believe no one would believe them over him. A titled aristocrat with connections to the royal family versus working-class women and children. He thought he was untouchable. She pointed to a section in the report. The investigators found evidence that he had been escalating his abuse of Emma specifically because she was too young to understand that she could tell. Someone. He thought a 7-year-old would be the perfect victim, too scared and confused to cause problems. The thought made Marcus sick to his stomach. Thank God I noticed when I did. Actually, Wells said with a slight smile, it wasn't just luck that you noticed. The investigation team interviewed all the castle staff who had regular contact with the Ashford family. Several people noticed concerning signs, but you were the only one who documented what you saw and took action. She pulled out another document. This is a proposal I've submitted to the Home Secretary's office. I want to implement new training protocols for all royal protection personnel on recognizing signs of domestic violence and child abuse. I've recommended you to help develop and deliver this training. Marcus was stunned. Me. But I'm just a protection officer. You're a protection officer who saved a child's life by trusting your instincts and refusing to look the other way. Wells corrected. That makes you exactly the right person to teach others how to do the same thing. 2 days later, Marcus received another unexpected visitor. Jonathan Mitchell, the royal family's private secretary, appeared at his office with a request that caught him completely off guard. The family would like to meet with you privately, Mitchell explained. They want to thank you personally for what you did. And they want to discuss how to prevent something like this from happening again. Marcus had served the royal family for 12 years, but had never had a private audience with them. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon in the Queen's private sitting room. When the time came, Marcus found himself more nervous than he had been during any security assignment in his career. But the royal family's warmth and genuine gratitude quickly put him at ease. Officer Thompson, the Queen said, extending her hand, we cannot adequately express our gratitude for your actions. You have upheld the finest traditions of service and protection. The conversation that followed was unlike anything Marcus had imagined. The royal family was deeply troubled by the fact that a child had been abused within their own residence, and they wanted to understand how their security and guest protocols could be improved to prevent future incidents. We've always focused our security measures on external threats, Prince William explained. We never adequately considered that dangers to vulnerable people might come from within our own circles. The Queen nodded thoughtfully. We want to establish new procedures for monitoring the welfare of all children who stay in royal residences, regardless of their family connections or social status. Marcus was invited to work with a special committee that would develop these new protocols. It was an honor he had never expected, but it felt right. Emma's suffering would at least serve a purpose in protecting other children. As the meeting concluded, the Queen had one final request. We understand that you've been in contact with Emma and her mother throughout this ordeal, she said. We would very much like to meet them when they're ready, to express our regret that this happened in our home and our admiration for Emma's courage. Marcus was deeply moved by the gesture. I'll pass along your message, Your Majesty. I think it would mean a great deal to both of them. That evening, Marcus called Detective Rodriguez to share the news about the royal family's request to meet Emma and her mother. "That's wonderful," Rodriguez said. "Sarah Mitchell has been worried that this whole situation might somehow reflect badly on her and Emma, that they might be seen as troublemakers. Knowing that the royal family supports them will be incredibly healing. How is Emma doing?" Marcus asked, as he always did during these calls. "Better every day," Rodriguez replied warmly. "She started school again this week. She's still shy, but her teacher says she's beginning to participate in class activities. And she's made a new friend, a girl named Lucy, who lives next door to her grandmother." Rodriguez paused for a moment, then continued with something that sounded almost like excitement in her voice. "Actually, Emma has been asking about you quite regularly. She wants to know if she can write you a letter to say thank you. Would that be appropriate?" Marcus felt his heart swell with emotion. "Of course. I would be honored to hear from." 6 months after that terrible November afternoon, Marcus stood in the witness box at Westminster Magistrates' Court, giving his testimony in the case against Lord James Ashford. The man who had once commanded respect in royal circles now sat in the dock. Looking smaller and less impressive than Marcus remembered, the courtroom was packed with supporters for the victims. Sarah Mitchell sat in the gallery with her mother and Emma's grandmother, showing a strength and confidence that hadn't been there during her time at the castle. Several other families who had come forward were also present. United in their determination to see justice done, Marcus's testimony was crucial to the prosecution's case. He methodically explained his observations, his growing concerns, and the events of that November afternoon when he had finally intervened. His detailed notes proved invaluable in establishing the timeline and pattern of abuse. "Officer Thompson," the prosecutor asked, "what made you decide to break protocol and enter that dining room?" Marcus looked directly at Lord Ashford as he answered. "I heard a child screaming in terror and pain. In that moment, my duty was clear. I'm a protection officer, and there was a child who needed protection." Lord Ashford's defense team tried to portray the intervention as an overreach by security personnel. But the evidence was overwhelming. Medical reports documented Emma's injuries. Other victims testified about similar patterns of abuse. And castle staff members confirmed the atmosphere of fear that had surrounded the Ashford family when the verdict came 3 days later. Lord Ashford was found guilty on all charges, multiple counts of child abuse, domestic violence, assault, and threatening behavior. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison and placed on the sex offenders register for life. As the judge read the sentence, Marcus saw several of the victims crying with relief. Justice had been served, but more importantly, Lord Ashford would never again be in a position to hurt vulnerable children or women. After the trial, Marcus was approached by Emma and her mother outside the courthouse. The little girl, who had once been too frightened to speak above a whisper, now ran up to him with a bright smile. Emma called out, throwing her arms around his waist in an enthusiastic hug. "Mummy said the bad man can't hurt anyone anymore because you were brave?" Sarah Mitchell approached with tears in her eyes. "I can never adequately thank you for what you did," she said. "You saved our lives, both of ours. Emma is a completely different child now. She's happy. She's confident. She's everything a 7-year-old should be." Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, amazed by the transformation in the little girl. Her eyes were bright and curious instead of fearful and withdrawn. She was chattering excitedly about her new school, her friends, and the horse riding lessons her grandmother had enrolled her in. "How is Mr. Buttons?" Marcus asked with a smile. Emma giggled. "He's very good. Granny taught me how to mend his ear where it was torn. He's not sad anymore either." The simple statement hit Marcus harder than he expected. The little girl and her beloved teddy bear had both been damaged by their experiences. But with love and proper care, they were both healing. "I have something for you," Emma said. Reaching into her small backpack, she pulled out a handmade card decorated with stickers and glitter. "I made this at school. My teacher helped me with the big words." Marcus opened the card to find a message that would stay with him for the rest of his life. "Dear Marcus, thank you for being my hero when I needed one. Because of you, I know there are good people who will keep children safe. When I grow up, I want to help scared children too. just like you helped me. Love, Emma. 3 months later, Marcus stood before a room full of royal protection officers, police constables, and security personnel from across the United Kingdom. He was delivering the first session of the new training program on recognizing and responding to domestic violence and child abuse. It's the most important thing to understand, Marcus told the assembled officers, is that predators often hide behind respectability and social status. They count on people being reluctant to interfere in private family matters. They use our own professionalism and discretion against us. He clicked to the next slide in his presentation, which showed statistics about child abuse in wealthy and influential families. Abuse happens at every level of society, and it's often worst among those who have the most power to hide it and intimidate victims into silence. Our job as protection officers is to protect everyone under our care, regardless of their social status or family connections. The program that Marcus helped develop became a model for law enforcement agencies throughout Europe. His experience with the Ashford case was studied in police academies and used to train social workers, teachers, and other professionals who worked with children. Chief Inspector Wells, who had supported Marcus throughout the entire ordeal, was promoted to head the new Royal Family Protection Division. One of her first decisions was to recommend Marcus for promotion to Senior Protection Officer with special responsibility for developing child safeguarding protocols. A year after the trial, Marcus received an invitation that surprised and delighted him. Emma was turning 8 years old, and she wanted him to attend her birthday party. The celebration was held in her grandmother's garden in Surrey. Filled with children from her new school and neighbors who had become like family, Emma had grown taller and more confident, but she still carried Mr. Buttons everywhere she went. When she opened her presents, she made sure to show each one to her faithful teddy bear, including him in every moment of joy. You know, Sarah Mitchell told Marcus as they watched Emma playing with her friends, she talks about becoming a police officer when she grows up. She says she wants to help other children who are scared and need someone brave to protect them. Marcus watched Emma organizing a game for the younger children at the party, naturally taking on a protective role with those who were smaller than herself. The little girl who had once hidden in corners and alcoves was now confident enough to be a leader and protector of others. She has the heart for it, Marcus said, and she understands better than most what it means when someone truly needs help. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Emma approached Marcus with one final surprise. She had written him another letter, this one longer and more sophisticated than her earlier notes. Dear Marcus, she had written in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, Today, I am 8 years old and I am happy. I am happy because I am safe and because I know that there are good people in the world who help children when they are scared. You taught me that even when bad things happen, there are always good people who will make them stop. Thank you for being the good person who saved me and my mummy. I will never forget how you were brave when we needed someone to be brave. I hope when I grow up, I can be brave like you and help other children too. Love always, Emma. Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it in his wallet next to the first drawing Emma had sent him. These simple gifts from a little girl who had survived terrible trauma and found the strength to trust again meant more to him than any official commendation or professional recognition ever could. As he drove back to Windsor Castle that evening, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that cold November day when he had first noticed a too quiet little girl sitting alone in an alcove. He had risked his career to protect a child, and in return, that child had taught him the true meaning of courage, healing, and hope. The next morning, Marcus was back at his post, walking the same corridors where he had once watched helplessly as a little girl suffered in silence. But now, those halls held different memories. They were the place where someone had finally stood up for Emma, where justice had begun, and where a child had learned that there were adults willing to fight for her. Safety.Emma was right about one thing in her letter. There were good people in the world who helped children when they were scared. Marcus was proud to be one of them, and he was determined to train others to do the same. Because every child deserved what Emma had finally found: safety, love, and the knowledge that someone cared enough to protect them, no matter what the cost might be, in his desk drawer. Marcus kept a small photo that Emma's grandmother had sent him from the birthday party. It showed Emma laughing as she blew out the candles on her cake. Surrounded by friends and family who loved her, Mr. Button sat prominently on the table beside the cake. A silent guardian who had helped keep a little girl's hope alive during her darkest days, looking at that photo, reminded Marcus why he had chosen a career in protection work in the first place. It wasn't about the prestige or the proximity to royalty. It was about moments like these when training, instinct, and courage came together to make a real difference in someone's life. It was about ensuring that children like Emma could grow up safe, happy, and confident that there were always good people willing to stand between them and harm. The little girl who had once been too frightened to speak above a whisper was now 8 years old, brave and determined to help other children when she grew up. And Marcus knew that whatever challenges lay ahead in his career, he would always carry the memory of Emma's courage and resilience as inspiration to continue fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves.